Okay, here we go. It's another episode of Marketing Management Money with Ryan and Ryan, and I'm gonna do something. I'm gonna confess here a little bit of. So, we have a tendency on this show to get off on tangents.
Get distracted.
Get distracted. Thank you. That is the perfect word.
It's like herding cats around here.
Sometimes it is, and it's all good content, but when you start to bounce around, it adds distraction, as you were saying, into the show. And what we're going to talk about today, ironically or appropriately, is not getting distracted in your business. And specifically, I want to talk about limiting your focus. There's a lot of power in limiting what you focus on. Now, it seems to me that entrepreneurs, they kind of want to take on more than they should. They naturally, I picture the kid at Thanksgiving who is just, he's like piling on his plate, and he's piling on a little bit more, and he's piling on a little bit more, and his mom's over there just like, your eyes are bigger than your stomach, and I picture this kid who, this food looks amazing. And then he's like, halfway into it, and he's starting to feel just the weight of those potatoes sitting at the bottom of his gut.
And all of a sudden he's like, I'm not even going to get close. Hey, pie.
and that's what I've seen with entrepreneurs is I've seen this idea where, they're like, oh, you know what? We should launch, this new division of our company. And while we're at it, let's go international. And while we're at it, we're going to do 7 different social media platforms. And while we're at it, and like in and of themselves, each one of these things is good for the business. Collectively, they're disastrous.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And you take any one of those things and you half bake it and it becomes disastrous, right?
Right.
Let alone trying to do them all at once, half baked. So, I see this often where an entrepreneur will, they begin to find success, and there's a lot of temptation to be able to, all of a sudden, all this work that they've been putting in, all these ideas that they've had, all this magic kind of starts to come together, and it's like, ooh, they start dreaming on a whole new level, all of a sudden they're like, ooh, pie,
Right.
And they want to add a bunch of things into this or offshoot into different directions and what have you. And I think that that's maybe the bane of an entrepreneur's existence is once you find that success, or once you start to get into that magic when things are working, to shift gears and be like, okay, now we're going to be steady and true in what? Follow the North Star,
Yeah, I mean, as you put it, I mean, I wouldn't go so strong as to say the bane of an entrepreneur. I mean, that sounded really grim.
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. But it does go contrary to the nature of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is innovative, it's creative, it's fast moving. And then all of a sudden you find something that's working and it becomes very predictable and very redundant. And
exactly.
And the entrepreneur wants to fight against that and move on to the next thing, because that's what their personality is. And so I can see a lot of that.
Well, and you see the effects of this, or the results of that, character, the nature of that characteristic, right? Mm-hmm. In other employees that work for that company, you'll see somebody who is much more organized start to panic at the thought of moving on and going to the next. And it's like, we haven't even barely started this yet. It's like, no, you're done. That's good enough. And they're like freaking out,
Right.
I don't know, And so, I mean, what do you do as an entrepreneur when you're in this space of like, hey, that worked. Now all of a sudden we have some success here, and we need to dial in our processes, or we need to, make sure things are gonna head in the right direction, run smoothly, while also maintaining that entrepreneurialism, that entrepreneur spirit of innovation and moving forward and moving fast and
Sure. Yeah. Now I want to try and do something.
Sure.
And I shouldn't do this.
Okay.
I'm going to try and describe a complicated graph via a podcast.
Nice. Let's give it a shot.
Because graphically you can see what's going on in this situation. You got to start with understanding the product life cycle, which is nothing more than a bell curve.
Right.
And so on a product life cycle, you have the early adopters, you have the shakeout, you have maturity, and then you have decline. There are variations of that, but that's essentially what's going on. So
I literally don't think I've ever heard the phases in the middle be called the shakeout. I love that.
Yeah, it's where so the early adopters are the people that are just jumping on board because they have to have the latest and the greatest.
Right.
And then the shakeout phase is saying that everyone's jumped into the market.
Right.
And only the only the strong survive in that, and there's this great shakeout and everyone kind of like falls down and then
I just never heard it called that. The Great Shakeout. Man, this episode is freaking dramatic. The bane of their existence as
Surviving.
they come upon the Great Shakeout.
So then you have maturity.
We should write a book like Chronicles of Narnia. Just kidding.
No one would be interested in the Chronicles of Small Business. But in maturity, that is where you really make money. And actually in decline is a fabulous stage for cash flow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, everyone's like, oh, you don't want to be in decline. And I'm like, well, you actually do awesome cash-wise because you're not injecting any new capital into it. You're just, reaping you're just taking and taking and taking until the thing is dead.
Yeah, right.
And so so picture a product life cycle. And, the entrepreneur, what we're talking about is they always want to be on that, early adopter and the great shakeout where, the graph is sloping up. It's that hockey stick shape that everyone talks about that is like, oh, yeah, the exponential growth. They always want to see it, growing up. Well, in business, you actually want to give it plenty of time to grow up, get to maturity, and enjoy the decline of it. And so if you are pulling out premature and not capitalizing on all of the profits and the cash flow that happen in maturity and decline, then you're losing out on where the money's good.
Right.
And so when we talk about, staying focused, part of what I want to talk about is I want to talk about staying with a concept. And, yes, this is the product life cycle, but guess what? This is also the process life cycle. This is also the services life cycle. Like it's a bell curve, and it's a life cycle where, things, they start, they grow rapidly, they hit maturity, and then they hit decline. And, it's that way in life, in nature, and that's why it's called a life cycle. And it's that way in your business. And you need to make sure that you are following this through and staying focused on that. So I don't know. Did I do okay describing a graph via podcast?
For sure.
Okay.
I think a bell curve is pretty...
Well, there were stages, and in my mind, there were like lines that were drawn, and you
got the fancy graph in your head.
I know, it was pretty cool, like snapshot.
Yeah, mine's like real basic.
Bell.
Yeah. It's 3 lines, literally. One down, one to the side, and then a squiggle.
See, like I had the profit line and the cash line that went through.
You got formulas.
Just lines. It was pictures.
The square root of R. Just kidding.
So anyway, staying focused is as an entrepreneur, we've discussed how, the tendency is to want to get excited, find the next new and greatest, chase the things that are rapidly evolving, that are, that are really on that steep uptick. But those are all capital intensive. They're expensive to operate. Those are the things that if you think about following a trail, is it easier to blaze the trail or follow the trail? It's easier to follow the trail. And so if you're the guy who's, got the machete and, and you're the axe and you're chopping down the trees so that the wagons can come behind you, it's like, well, the wagons are moving a lot faster than you are because you're doing all the work. Well, it's the same thing in business.
I feel like your metaphor is actually really good, because it's like you imagine this guy at the front with a machete trying to blaze a trail. He's going to be working his freaking tail off, right? And he's going to be just moving incredibly quickly, and he's going to be moving from bush to tree to whatever else is in his way.
Okay, but I hear this all the time. Well, what about first mover advantage?
It's not always an advantage.
Yeah, honestly, first mover advantage is really tough, and it doesn't pan out most of the time.
Right.
It's usually the guy who comes up second, who saw all the mistakes of the guy who was first, fixed those mistakes, and was like, oh, now I got it.
First mover advantage is far too overrated, in my opinion.
It's not just opinion. I mean, if you look at it, Facebook was not the first mover.
Right.
If you...
What's MySpace?
I'm
just kidding. They're a music platform now, right?
Right. And it's like with Apple, you look at when Apple really started doing iTunes, they weren't the first mover.
Right.
There were all those, I don't even remember the names of some of those that, the music platforms.
You're talking about the devices, right?
No, the platforms where you could go on and get all your tunes.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't even know there were other options.
Yeah, there were. iTunes was not the first. And so, you look at these really big companies, and, a lot of times they come in after the fact, and they're just like, oh, that's what we're doing. So when you
that's not to say that you shouldn't be innovative in your business, though, right?
Well, but they are innovative. They just aren't always trying to blaze the trail. And that's
the point.
That's the point. The point is to say that if you as an entrepreneur are feeling like you have to be doing everything, and it's like, oh, we got to be doing this, and we got to be doing this, and we got to be doing this. It's like, no. Stop, take a minute, look and see where there's opportunity. And from that opportunity, then decide what you're going to focus on and be amazingly good at what you do.
And I feel like it's more than so you mentioned that entrepreneurs will feel like they need to do everything, right? I think that is the case, but I think there's also the entrepreneurs will feel like they need to be leading all the time. And leading means that you always have something, new coming up, right? It's like reading a novel that you've never read before. All of a sudden there's new plot twists and new character development and new blah, 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 blah. And so it's like, oh man, well, I've got to come up with all these ideas, and we're going to do this next. Well, we're going to do this next. And it's like, slow your roll.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Pull back a little bit. And, like you said, look for those opportunities. If you're hacking away you're blazing a trail in the forest, and you look 3 feet to your right and there's an established trail that's going in the exact same direction, maybe, just maybe, you should step over onto that trail. You know what I mean?
Right.
And to pull it out of the realm of metaphors and hypotheticals, if you don't need to come up with your own CRM system. You don't need to come up with your own sales process. You don't need to come up with your own, I don't know, accounting software and methods and whatever. It's like, if you, and you don't even need to come up with constantly new products and services, right? Granted, yeah, it's part of what makes the world spin is innovation and whatever, but there's also an element of consistency. There's also this element of doing things the right way, taking time to commit to an idea that works and giving it everything that it needs, right? Like letting this fuel like burn thoroughly, right? Like you don't light a bonfire and as it starts to, flame up, you're like, well, okay, let's build another fire. It's like, no, you let that one rage, right?
Right.
And you enjoy it. And if it's not quite, if it needs a little tweak here or there, like that's where the bouncing, in my mind, in entrepreneurship can come in and be fulfilling for entrepreneurs that are this way, is look for those things that you could tweak in the process. Look for those things that, this established trail that's 3 feet to your right might work really well, except for this little piece of it. You might have to, maybe there's a tree that's fallen in the path and you've got to cut that out. And again, bringing it out of the hypotheticals, it's like if, for example, not every small business needs to have a website. Not every small business needs to be on social media. Not every small business needs to have word of mouth advertising. Sorry, I had to go there.
But for those of you who might be new to the
inside
program,
joke,
we're not huge fans of word of mouth advertising. Not in and of itself, but
the stereotypical
word of mouth.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you've been hitting on internal processes pretty heavy, and I agree with the staying focused with internal processes. But I also want to talk about external products and services here for a second. Okay. Same rules apply, is that don't try and be everything to everyone. Allow someone else to pave the trail. And, but
that can be hard though.
But stay true to who you are. And I'm gonna give 2 examples here.
Okay.
So these are both restaurant examples. And the reason why I love restaurants as examples is because of the menu. And when you start thinking about the menu, like menus, they either make sense or they don't make sense. And, you've done it, I've done it. You've gone into a place and you start looking at the menu and you're just like, what the? So I wanted to take my wife out to dinner, and there was this Italian restaurant that I wanted to try. I had never gone there before. And so I go into this Italian restaurant, and first off, they were playing 80s rock music. And honestly, I'm not a huge fan of Italian opera, but I wanted to feel like I was in an Italian restaurant, not just some, American diner.
Right.
And so, that kind of turned me off, especially because I was trying to make it a nice evening with my wife. And I'm like, oh, well, sorry, like right off the bat, just that little thing. And so then we sit down, we open up the menu, and when I go Italian, I want to see, I want to see Italian on the menu. So I'm going through and I'm looking and I'm like, they got salads, they got burgers, they got sandwiches.
Yeah.
And I'm like, where's the Italian portion? And I find it, and there were 4 items.
It's in the meatball sub.
Right.
Wait a second.
And so I had a horrible time. I've never gone back to that restaurant. And I was asking some other people, and I'm just like, what's up with that restaurant? And they're like, well, it used to be really good Italian, and then, the original owner got too old, and so now someone else took over, and they didn't really do Italian. They just kind of opened up whatever. And I'm just like, stay focused. If you're in an Italian restaurant, be Italian. Now, the flip side of that is there's this burrito truck that I love. It's down in rural Utah, and their menu is very basic and very simple, but you know what you're getting.
Yeah.
And, they focus on like their food is outstanding. There's not a lot of options. There's not a lot of variety. It's like, do you want a quesadilla or a burrito? So do I want it flat or round?
Yeah. Right.
And
if you make us go through the extra work of rolling it up, it's going to cost you an extra 50 cents.
Right. Like what exactly is the difference here? And it's very simple and it's very basic, but the food is fabulous. And I love going there, and I've recommended it and everything. And I'm like, look, you guys stay focused to your simple menu that, you make sure. And their whole claim to fame is the quality, fresh, homemade ingredients.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's awesome. You got 5 ingredients, and they're all quality, and they're all fresh, and so I know I can't go wrong with the menu.
Right.
Versus the other one that I'm just like, I don't know, am I getting burgers or calzones? I'm thoroughly confused right now.
Yeah, right. I feel like a lot of those, you said, the principles are the same, but I don't know. To me, almost one is like a symptom of the other, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe not so much that. Maybe it's kind of like a chicken and the egg kind of a thing. Like you have these entrepreneurs that will chase something new products, we're going to offer this service now, we're going to offer this. But then that translates into, well, now we have all of these problems internally, you know what I mean, with our processes and procedures. We don't, because everything new that you do in your business requires a new way of you doing your business.
It multiplies.
And and if you don't tie up all those loose ends, you don't button all of that up before moving on, then it is going to mount very quickly into a seemingly big problem to where it's like, 3-5 years down the road, you're looking back and you're like, holy cow, now we need to hire an entire department to sort out that mess. Mm-hmm. I have seen that. I've seen that happen, and it's not pretty. And at the end of the day, you can go through that process of cleaning all that up, and the company's not going to be better off. You're just going to end up wasting money and time and resources, and you're going to get frustrated, period. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. And so I guess this is what I would say to kind of wrap this episode up is if you are questioning whether you are spread too thin, you need to look at it. And first off, if you even remotely feel like you're spread too thin, you are.
Yeah.
Because
for sure.
You'll get spread too thin before you feel like you're spread too thin.
Yeah.
And so you have to feel like you're not diversified enough to be playing the game correctly, in my opinion.
Right.
I mean, everyone's a little bit different, but honestly, you need to be constantly thinking, oh man, I should be doing more to have it right, because everyone, and we're so just, we book our calendars completely. We don't have time for anything. And, I see these people that they're on a treadmill eating and watching a self-help at the same time. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, can you cram it? Why don't you get dressed at the same time?
Right.
At some point, just sit down and enjoy breakfast. You don't have to be on the treadmill eating and, reading a book and listening to a podcast all this. Now, don't turn off our podcast. Close the book.
There you go. Exactly. Do that other thing another time. No, it's like, yeah, you're spot on. It's like me. I'm working on a project right now of remodeling a house, and I have this bedroom where it's like, what am I going to do with this? My wife wants it as her like spa area space, right? Mm-hmm. I want it as an office. We kind of look at it and we're like, oh, it could be a spare bedroom. The kids want it as a playroom. It's like, it could be all of these things. I mean, we could throw some like fold up desk space in there with a Murphy bed for the spare bedroom, and have her have like a folding spa table. But at some point it's like, just leave it a laundry room.
Right.
That's what it was originally designed for. Like, leave it as, and maximize that space. And I think that's that really is the takeaway here, is like, whatever is going well, whatever that part of your business is doing that's going well, maximize that, right? And don't try to do anything crazy. Don't, leave all of that for the sandbox out back and playing with your kids in the backyard. You know what I mean? But stay focused in your business. Money will keep rolling in and you'll keep having time with your kids in the sandbox. So anyway, all right. Enough metaphors for today. You guys are great. Thank you so much for listening in. We will catch you next time.
Take care.